I grew up Lutheran, actually, the daughter of a Lutheran pastor. I had a warm and loving home and parents who showed their affection freely and often. I have fond memories of going to church every Sunday and admiring my dad as pastor. My childhood years were filled with going to Sunday church services, Sunday school, and parents who reinforced the importance of our faith on a regular basis. As I grew into adulthood, I put church aside, but it's something I always knew I would come back to one day. Even though I haven't always attended church, I've always been aware that God was leading me. Sometimes the message is clear, and at other times it wasn't. In early adulthood, I was following a path that many would have predicted for me. I majored in music in college and began a great career in arts administration. This journey had its ups and downs, to be sure, but I knew God had given me the gifts of music to be shared, and I was using that gift to the best of my ability to bring music to people. Since my career was feeling settled, I decided to do something unexpected and started running. I signed up for a half marathon and then a marathon, and I met a good friend that I trained with, Jessica. While we were running, she told me about a volunteering experience she had at our mission of Our Lady of Angels, a Catholic parish on the west side of Chicago that served as a donation space for the Greater Chicago Food Depository. We made a plan to volunteer together, and on a cold January morning, I found myself unpacking food next to a nice gentleman named Tim. We got to talking, and a few months later, we started dating. He had a 6-year-old daughter, Megan, from his previous marriage. I met Megan, and she was delightful and warm and very easy to love. We were married 3 years later. The unexpected blessing was meeting my husband, Tim, in the humblest of places at a time when I least expected it. But it was easy to see what joy it brought me and us to start this new chapter. It was easy to see how God had brought the three of us together as a family and given us this blessing. Shortly after we married, I decided that God was calling me to a church home, and I signed up for RCIA. I had a wonderful experience learning more about the faith, and I made the decision to be confirmed. After many years of feeling like a stranger at Mass, I felt joyful to be confirmed at Easter Vigil. Although I didn't expect to become Catholic after being raised Lutheran, it was easy to see God's loving presence in my life as I came to the table of communion as an official member of the Catholic Church, and united my husband and I in our faith life. Like many couples, Tim and I had dreams of expanding our family, which led us on a very unexpected journey. Shortly after we were married, we learned through a test at my doctor's office that we would have trouble getting pregnant. We were referred to a fertility doctor immediately, who confirmed the news. After 6 months of tests and procedures, our doctor told us we were not going to have children of our biological own. We didn't expect this news at all. We were shocked and devastated. We began considering other options, including adoption. As joyous as I was to consider being a parent, there was more than a tinge of pain knowing I would not be the biological mom to a child. Several months later, in the midst of this pain and confusion, I found out I was pregnant. I was over the moon joyful, but also very fearful, since this spontaneous pregnancy was given no chance to happen. Joy and hopeful anticipation grew as we passed the test indicating we would have a healthy baby. We began sharing the news with our family and friends, but at my 20-week ultrasound, we learned that the baby would have a clubfoot. But doctors told us that the vast majority of babies born with clubfoot are just fine. On July 15, 2013, we welcomed a beautiful baby boy, Danny. There was no doubt in my mind that this is the child that God intended us to have. Despite all the odds against us and against all medical and scientific reasoning, God had given us this precious gift. We had a child when we least expected it, and it was easy to see this was God's blessing to us. As joyful as I was to get to know this little miracle boy and fall in love with him as mothers do, there were issues that caused anxiety and disappointment. His development was delayed, and although that was expected for the first 6 months due to his clubfoot, the delays continued, and I couldn't help but wonder and worry about his future, but I felt optimistic that he would be okay. He was just behind, and he would catch up. Then we were blessed with the news that I was pregnant again, this time with a baby girl. I couldn't believe God's path for us would include not just one, but 2 children, but we were happy to welcome our daughter into our family amongst God's loving presence. Around the time we knew we were expecting again, we began genetic testing for our son, following our pediatrician's advice. For over a year, we rode an emotional roller coaster of tests and procedures. When my son was 2 years old and my daughter was still a newborn, we got our answer with a single phone call that changed our lives forever. Danny was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder, a TRX, an intellectual disability. It is extremely rare. There are only around 200 known cases of ATRX in the world today. And it affects only boys, so our daughter was not affected. We loved our beautiful little boy who smiled and laughed and touched our hearts with his big smile and infectious laughter. But we now had to reconcile that happy boy with letting go of our dreams, of seeing him off to college, living on his own, getting married, and having children. Beyond all those dreams for his future, just knowing I might never hear him speak was heartbreaking. He was also in physical pain daily, with regurgitation and digestive issues, chronic anxiety, and crying. And I realized that this may never change. As this news became real, I went numb. It was too much to take in. I couldn't help but reflect on my life so far and the series of unexpected blessings, how I met my husband at the time I least expected it. I became Catholic, which I didn't expect. We were pregnant at the time I least expected, and I was ready to embrace all the happy feelings around those good things and see those as God's gift to us. But now my son was diagnosed with this extremely rare syndrome. How had God led me here? I didn't see the blessing in my son's diagnosis. I only saw what it took away from him, from us, and all of us as a family. My husband and I decided to support each other in attending the respective church retreats at St. Margaret Mary. The retreat was well-timed as I was still in deep grief. I welcomed the time away to reflect and find God in our story, and felt led to tell Father Ted about Danny. I asked for guidance in having faith that God had a higher purpose for our family. He reminded me that God is walking through our struggles with me and giving me the grace to get through every single day, one day at a time. Those precious words from Father Ted were the most comforting words I have ever heard. It was then that I really saw that God had been with us all along. God is not the all-powerful God who will erase hardships. God is there to walk with us through our struggles. God saves us from nothing, but sustains us in all things. I left church feeling lighter and more at peace. Did it make our lives any easier? No, of course not. I pray that one day Danny will be able to digest a meal without spitting up, and that he might one day say, Mom. Our lives are not easy, but I feel God asking me to accept life as it is today, without expectations for tomorrow. And as the months have gone by from that very special retreat, I've learned a few things along the way. I've learned humility, as I thought I had all the skills to be a great mom, but that I had absolutely no idea how to parent a child with special needs and teach him skills like walking, feeding, and communicating. We rely on therapists and doctors in these areas to help us and him, and he has a great team that works with us to give him the best care and quality of life possible. I've learned the strength of my own parental instinct because sometimes well-meaning advice given by those same therapists and doctors is not right for us. Since none of his doctors have ever heard of his syndrome, we, his parents, are now the experts in our child. And sometimes we know best. I have developed compassion for all kids with special needs. As soon as I see a kid with special needs, my heart softens and I want to hear their story. Since I don't know which children have special needs and which don't, that compassion is extended to all children. And beyond that, to all people. We don't know the challenges that each one of us is facing. I've learned persistence as I've seen how hard my son works to learn new skills, and it inspires me to work hard and persist too. Like the day I heard Danny speak his first word at 3.5 years old. I cried tears of joy as he could finally tell me with his own voice that a horse says, "Nay." He also recently learned to use sign language to say more, and he is waving goodbye, which are skills that I didn't think he could do even just 6 months ago. I've seen the power of Danny's beaming smile to change someone's day. He will approach anyone in hopes for a smile back. When he gets that smile, he jumps up and down and laughs, smiling even bigger. He has such a beautiful, loving spirit, a shining example of God's love. Danny's diagnosis has certainly meant sacrifices for our family. We live life a lot differently and more simply. When he was diagnosed, I could only see what it took away from us. But now I'm seeing some of the blessings that it's given us. I've learned that you never know what is coming down the road, to appreciate today and be ready with a teachable heart for whatever God may have in store for me tomorrow. Best of all, I've grown in relationship with God and thankfulness that He is with us always for all of our unexpected blessings.